Accusations are flying as journalist Ken Klippenstein has published a new report for The Intercept saying UFO whistleblower Dave Grusch, who recently testified before the House Oversight Committee, was at one point referred to a mental health institution following two 911 calls from his wife in what Grusch says is a PTSD-related alcoholic incident. Grusch and his associates initially accused the intelligence community of leaking non-public health records to Klippenstein, who has since revealed he in fact retained access to this information by Freedom of Information Act requests. Resulting dramas got both sides. They're accusing the other of not telling the truth to the public about the situation. So we've got Ken Klippenstein himself in the studio now. Join us defending his story. It's good to see you, Ken. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for coming in, Ken.
Great to be back with you guys.
All right, Ken. So let's get into the nitty-gritty, I guess, of the story itself. Let's start broad strokes. What is the story about? What is it?
Well, so he's kind of the star witness of the subcommittee that's looking at the UFO allegations. Not just him, but there are two pilots as well. And so in the reporting on it, I noticed a phrase popping up again and again: a decorated war hero, decorated war hero, decorated war hero. And I'm not disputing that he is, but when I hear that, it's kind of like, okay, well, where's the critique? Like, where's the negative side, or where's the vetting? And I didn't see any of that by any of the media. So I thought, well, I'm going to go and look and see what I can find. And so I know people both in DOD, in the intelligence community, and I did a call for tips to try to broaden the picture. It really just came from a mosaic of different sources that gave me ideas of what was going on. We can talk about that more. But really my motive was just, it didn't feel like anybody was vetting this guy.
So lay out the specifics of the story and what you found through your FOIA request.
So under the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, you can request police records. They're called call detail records, CADs, obscure things that aren't kind of like the typical police report that journalists tend to ask for. And maybe that's how they didn't know it existed. I have some practice with FOIA. I've been doing this a long time. So when I got these back, it was two different incidents reported by his wife and previous wife, in which he had gone, in the second case that was in 2018, I think, he had gone into it's described as like an angry, drunken rage where he was suicidal, asked his wife to kill him. She called police, said that the guns were locked up, and then he was placed in a mental facility where after he was assessed and then released, I think, a day later.
Got it. And this happened 2014, 2018?
Both. Yeah.
Okay. So there's been a lot of back and forth. Grusch accused you of getting these things leaked by the intelligence community. You revealed it came from the Freedom of Information Act. You did a Twitter space last night. You indicated you were tipped off by this. So were you tipped off by members of the intelligence community?
It was both the Defense Department. I mean, again, it's a mosaic. You talk to as many people as you can because you don't want to be dependent on any one individual who might have a grudge or whatever it is. But yes, I did talk to both DOD people and intelligence people.
So in terms of the substance of the tip here, the accusation, I mean, aren't they fundamentally correct that, like, you are publishing dirt that was tipped to you by intelligence community?
Well, the thing is, when I put out my call for tips, I said, if you have anything positive or negative, because at the end of the day, like, I don't want to, he's a human being. I don't, to be candid with you guys so people can account for where I'm coming from, I don't believe in the UFO stuff. I think he's incorrect about it. However, I don't want to just punch at him. I would have included anything positive that I had gotten. Unfortunately, I didn't get anything. Now, that doesn't mean that he doesn't have, redeeming qualities. Everybody does, even me. But I just didn't happen to hear any of that. And so I had to go with what, I was told. And to give you guys a sense, too, I can speak to the characteristics of the sources because I understand why people are concerned about that because most of the reporting that you read is planted. When you go to the New York Times, most of those stories are planted by committee chairs, by the White House, whatever it is. That's not how I roll. I know I tend to talk to mid-level people, people kind of like Grusch, GS-14s, GS-15s, people who are experienced but didn't quite have the political chops generally to make it to the top. So those are the types of people that I was talking to. Just full disclosure, if you want to ask anything else about sourcing, I'm happy to talk about that.
Yeah, so I mean, basically you're being accused of, like, this is a smear job. You're trying to undermine his credibility. What did you see as the value of this information? Do you think that the fact that he has a PTSD diagnosis makes him more likely to lie, make things up, and less credible in general?
No, absolutely not PTSD. But, in the police reports, his wife called him an alcoholic and said that this happened repeatedly. That, I think, is a concern. I think that if someone's an alcoholic, yeah, that should be factored into your assessment of what their credibility is. But
but if it's alcohol related to PTSD, I mean, let's be serious. I mean, he in sworn testimony, he admits he had a problem with PTSD. He says it was, I mean, I'm assuming he's related to these alcoholic incidents. He got treatment per your own reporting. And all of the incidents he's now testified to, sworn testimony as well as a whistleblower, is post-treatment. So I'm just trying to understand, like, what is the value of this information being put forward? And to be clear, you didn't do anything wrong. You're doing your job. We get crazy tips from people all the time here. So I have no issue with the Freedom of Information Act, even if you did report it, even if you did get a tip from the intel community. I guess it comes down to like the framing and the substance of like, what are we supposed to do with this information?
Well, I included in this story an example of the dozens of White House staffers who had their clearances revoked for smoking weed, including in states where it was legal.
Right.
Places where it's legal. So like this is part of the clearance process. And so again, this whole focus on PTSD, and if it makes him not credible, that was never something I said. That was a focus that he made trying to get ahead of the story in the statement that he put out. My interest was always the alcoholism. And I mean, I guess I feel as though there's some kind of grandstanding around this stuff, because the reality is if you're gonna say, get a medical procedure, go see a surgeon, you find out he's an alcoholic, that's probably gonna factor into your deciding somewhat, right?
Right. Well, I mean, is he an active alcoholic? Do you know that?
We know that from the reports his wife said he was.
Okay, in 2018.
Yes.
But we don't know anything since then.
No.
So do you think that he's lying? Do you think he was misled? Do you think that, you know, there's some sort of motive for him to, because, you know, with whistleblowers, this comes at great personal risk. Great. I'm sure this is not a fun experience for him. I'm sure it's not fun to have these things in the press and this type of personal scrutiny in some of the worst moments of his life dragged out in front of the public. So what sort of a motive would he have for not being honest and direct with the public?
I mean, around these issues, it's probably just embarrassing. I don't necessarily even fault him for not being more forthcoming about it. I blame the media.
I'm talking about why would he come forward with inaccurate claims to start with, the sort of things that he testified to? What would he stand to gain?
There's a
from
range
that?
of claims he makes, and I think a lot of them are probably true. Where we depart is when he says that it's space aliens or that we've recovered. But the idea, I know from my sources, and I think parts of this are public, there is a UAV crash recovery program. There is constantly retaliation against whistleblowers. I know that because I work with them and there's data on this. It happens when you report something to the Inspector General, there's a target on your back. So I totally take him at his word on that. And his lawyer was a former Inspector General of the IC, very respected person. I know people that know him. All I've heard was good things. So the whole retaliation thing, I assume that's true. They don't like people going to Congress and reporting things.
No.
You know, again, where we depart is the specifics. I also think it's true that there is a UAV crash recovery program. I just think just because you don't know and can't recognize what the technology is, that doesn't necessarily mean it's extraterrestrial.
Right, but why don't you present evidence to that fact then? I mean,
How
you
do
don't
you
believe it. Like, you say you don't believe him. I mean, listen, I don't know whether I believe him or not. To me, it's just extraordinary whenever you're like, you're before Congress, you're telling this under sworn testimony. I'm like, okay, well, I want to hear it from the other guy. Sean Kirkpatrick says it's not true. To me, that's great. We got two people under sworn testimony. They say it's not true. Why don't you put forward a story then being like, yeah, he's wrong. You know, the people are lying. Or, you know, I mean, I used to do this for a living. You can quote these people and be like, Grusch colleagues say he's a liar. Grusch colleagues say that he's completely not true. I mean, this is where I just don't understand.
Well, I'm in a difficult position because it's like, I don't want to, I mean, again, I disagree with them, but it's like, I want to rely on stuff that is really easy to substantiate.
Like FOIA.
Documents, and his wife too, current wife, not just ex-wife. If I'm just going off of stuff that people don't like him said verbally, it feels kind of like a smear, you know, like kind of unfair. And so it's like, I get where you're coming from, but it's like, put yourself in my shoes. Like, how would you navigate these kind of vague descriptions, you know?
Yeah, I don't know, to be honest with you. I guess so I'll come back to this, but on the alcoholism point, you keep talking about that.
Yeah.
I mean, so is it not a mental health issue then? Like, is it disqualifying in your mind? Being an I mean, first of all, we don't know if he's an alcoholic, because why, you know, who knows what people say
He
on
says he's
911.
recovered from PTSD.
He says he's recovered from PTSD.
Yeah.
His best friend killed himself, according to him. I know for a fact he served in Afghanistan. You know, these are pretty traumatic events. Millions of veterans kind of suffer the same thing. So, I mean, are you saying that's disqualifying for the entire story? Like, that's what I think a lot of people are upset about.
I don't think it necessarily is disqualifying. I think it might be. I mean, that's kind of why I put it out. People can look at it and decide what they think. I certainly don't want to have, like, it's crazy to have a blanket rule, anyone who has a substance abuse issue should not be. That's clearly false.
And look, this man is asking us to believe something. He's asking us to believe under sworn testimony.
And crucially,
as you said, his reputation is what he said. It's a totally legit question. I'm more like, well, what are we supposed to believe here? And what's the implication? I mean,
I just think it's more. I mean, people want to paint. Not saying you're doing this with this broad brush of it's false. It's and there are specific components to his claim. There's specific parts to his claims, and you know, his own lawyer, who I mentioned before, that law firm that's representing him has said that the reporting around the contents of his disclosures has been inaccurate. And I've never seen a lawyer do that in relation to, you know, stuff about a client. And so I think there's clearly something that's a little bit off here. and as to, you know, people disagree about what those details might be, but it's a spectrum of claims that he's making, you know.
Okay.